There is a question that many men start asking themselves after they've done everything right, built the career, earned the income provided for the family, hit the milestones. And the question is so quiet, most men are embarrassed to even admit it exists. Why don't I feel anything? I want to talk about something that almost never gets discussed, honestly. Not failure, not regret, not falling short. The opposite. The experience of getting there, actually getting to the point you spent years working toward, and finding something you didn't expect. No joy, no relief, a kind of emptiness, quiet, undramatic, almost polite in how it arrives. You are standing inside the life you built and waiting for the feeling that was supposed to come with it. And it doesn't come. Or it comes for a day, a week, and then it's gone. And what's left is this strange, flat silence, where the satisfaction was supposed to be. I think this is one of the most common experiences among men after 40, after 50, and one of the least talked about. Because talking about it carries a specific kind of shame. What do you say? I achieved what I was aiming for, and I feel empty? That sentence sounds like ingratitude, like complaint, dressed up as reflection. And so men don't say it. They keep moving, take on the next goal, push toward the next version of the life. Because as long as there's a next thing to pursue, as long as the destination is still ahead, you don't have to sit with the question of why arriving didn't feel like enough. Maybe you've felt this too. Not a crisis, not a dramatic fall, just a quiet, persistent underwhelm. The life looks exactly the way it was supposed to look. And something in you keeps waiting to feel that. But here is the strange part. Most men assume the emptiness means something went wrong, that they chose the wrong career, built the wrong life, aimed at the wrong things. And so they try to fix it on the outside. A new goal, a new acquisition, a bigger number. Most men misunderstand this completely. Because the emptiness after success isn't a signal that you got the destination wrong. It's a signal that the whole model was wrong. The model that told you that a certain kind of achievement would produce a certain kind of internal state. That once you arrived, you will finally feel complete, finally feel enough, finally feel like yourself. That model, the one you've been running on for 2 decades, that is the thing that failed, not you. And this is where things become interesting. Because when you understand what that model actually was, where it came from, what it promised, what it couldn't deliver, that model stops being a mystery. It starts to make perfect sense. Here's what I've come to understand. From very early in life, before we're old enough to question it, most men absorb a specific equation. Achievement equals worth. Not as a belief you consciously choose, as an atmosphere you grew up breathing. The better you perform, the more you matter. The more you accomplish, the more you deserve to exist without apology. And that equation becomes the engine of the whole half of life. You run it constantly. You don't even notice you're running it. It just feels like ambition, like drive, like being a man. But here is the problem with the equation. It was never actually about the achievement. The achievement was just the currency. What the equation was really about, what it was really about, was the feeling underneath. The feeling of being enough, of mattering, of being safe in the world. And no career, no income, no title, no acquisition, none of it can actually deliver that feeling. Because that feeling doesn't live on the outside. It never did. And something changes after 40, and even more after 50. That makes this impossible to keep ignoring. The fuel runs out. Not the ambition itself necessarily, but the belief underneath the ambition. The belief that the next achievement will finally be the one. That starts losing its grip. You've seen enough cycles now. The goal pursued, the goal reached, the brief satisfaction, and the return to the low hum. At some point, the cycle becomes visible as a cycle, not a path towards something, just a loop. Most men never notice this until they run the loop enough times that even the anticipation has gone flat. The goal is on the horizon, and instead of the old hunger, there's just a question. Even if I get there, then what? That question, when it arrives in earnest, changes everything. Because it's not cynicism, it's clarity. The first real, honest clarity about what the whole pursuit was actually about. And here is the psychological truth at the center of this. The emptiness after success isn't about success. It's about a hunger that success was never designed to feed. And that hunger, the real one, underneath all the achieving, is for something that almost no man is ever thought to name clearly. Meaning. Not achievement. Meaning. The experience of being alive in a way that feels connected to something genuinely yours. Not something borrowed from your industry. Not something inherited from your father's idea of success. Not something calibrated to impress people whose approval you were thought to need. Something that comes from the inside, from actual values, actual care, actual love for something that isn't contingent on what it earns you. And most men arrive at midlife having given enormous energy to their external project and almost known to that internal one, because no one told them the internal one existed. Nobody modeled it. Nobody rewarded it. The culture had nothing to say about it. So they pursued what the culture did have to say about it. And then they arrived and stood in the silence and waited for a feeling that was never going to come from that direction. I want to ask you something. Think about the last time you felt genuinely full, not satisfied in a temporary way, not relieved after finishing something hard, full. Like your life was actually making contact with something real in you. When was that? And I'm not asking because I know what the answer should be. I'm asking because for a lot of men who have built real things, achieved real things, and provided for real people, that fullness is surprisingly rare. And the gap between the success and the fullness is exactly the space this whole conversation is about. Maybe you felt this and keep it quiet. The sense that the life you built is real and something in it is still not quite reaching you. That gap isn't a character flaw. It's information. It's the interior pointing at something that the exterior career never had access to. And it's worth paying attention to it. Not with panic, not with reinvention, just with honesty. What is it, specifically, that makes me feel alive? Not successful, not impressive, not secure. Alive. The reason many men feel empty after success is not complicated. It's just rarely said out loud. They spent 20 years feeding an equation that promised something it couldn't deliver. And when the achievement arrived and the feeling didn't, there was nothing in the script for that. No framework. No permission to say it out loud. No next move that made sense. And so most men do the only thing they know. They pursue more. But the men who find their way through this, the ones who eventually land in something that feels like wholeness, they all do a version of the same thing. They stop. Not forever, not dramatically. They just stop long enough to ask what they actually want from the inside. Not what the next goal is, not what would look impressive. What would make life feel inhabited? What would close the gap between the success and the feeling of being fully there, inside it? That's the question that the emptiness is asking. And it's not a crisis. It's the most honest question a man can ask himself in the second half of his life. I've come to think that the emptiness after success is one of the most important moments in a man's life. Not because it means he failed, because it means the external project has finally done everything it can do. And something else is asking to begin. Not louder, not more ambitious, just truer. And the men who answer that invitation, who take the emptiness seriously instead of running from it, they tend to build something in the second half of their lives that the first half couldn't have produced. Not bigger, realer. The kind of life that doesn't require to feel something because it's made of the right material from the start.